Hi there. Thanks for coming along, everybody. It's a nice crowd. And just like to say thanks to everyone here at Street Level for allowing us to have the opportunity to showcase our work in such a beautiful building, such a great venue. As I said, I'm Angela Graham and I graduated from Glasgow City in the summertime. I was at Glasgow Kelvin College for 3 years, and then I went on to the City of Glasgow for 2 years to do my BA. I suppose I was just going to maybe talk about this project and how it started. I was predominantly a portrait photographer, was always drawn to portraits, and about 90% of my work was always featured some person in it. But when I started off on the 4th year, I decided to try and break free of that just for a short time. I felt my own work was starting to become a bit predictable, if I'm honest. I was getting a little bit bored, and I thought, if I'm getting bored, then I'm sure everybody else is maybe feeling a little bit the same, looking at what I'm doing. My work had the same style to it, and it did look at beauty. It seemed to be that every time I looked at something, I just wanted to find the beauty in it. So I decided to try and look at beauty within different areas in my life and not look at just people, faces. So it began with just like a little project that our lecturers had given us to take an iPad and go around the college and look at things. And it wasn't really to do with this project at the time. It was just a little exercise for breaking the ice, getting back to being a student again. So I took the iPad and I went round, and it had just been break time and everybody had gone back to class, but there was just evidence of people's interaction in the space. There was like coffee cups and banana peels and little bits of paper. Some people like to make little patterns with the salt or the sugar. And I just found that really interesting, that there was this evidence of people there, evidence of interaction of human, but they'd been taken away in an instant. They could have been there like a second before. So I started to photograph that, and that ended up being the start of this project. I began to then look at evidence of my own existence within my own space, like my home, my college, places that I visited. So I was also trying to look for beauty within strange things. So I decided to collect all the waste that I would throw away in a 24-hour period and photograph it like a catalogue of things that would give some hints to who I was. So I did that, but it just became a bit too much of a catalogue, and it just wasn't really pushing me it just wasn't pushing me far enough. I just felt it was just a bit too easy, but it was giving me something to think about. I was thinking about me and you or whoever. If you all collected your things that you throw away in a 24-hour period, it would give a little insight into who you are, what your likes and dislikes are. And if you had it was like a little portrait in itself. So it was coming back to portraiture again. So I was looking for a self-portrait without showing me in it. So I was doing this waste project. I was doing other things. I was looking for evidence, my fingerprints and different things, but it just kept coming back to my bed, and I was taking loads of pictures of my pillow and my covers and just different ways, and that's how it ended up. I began to think that the bed really does encompass everything. Like, you go there when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're in love, when you're rejected, to sleep, to watch movies. Your children can be in there, the children can be made in there. It's like everything's in there, your DNA. And it just for me, sort of signified me. So I decided to photograph my bed for 2 weeks every day when I got out of it. And try not to think about getting out of bed, just get out of a normal way, and then photograph it. And then you spread your bed up and you start anew, you smooth it all over, and then you get back in. And that was also significant of, like, each day we all have a chance to start again, or, start afresh. So that was basically what the project was about. I shot it in natural light, just coming through the window, because I didn't really want anything artificial in there. I just wanted it to be as representative of who this bed. The reason there's nothing else in it was just to take away anything that would distract from the bed itself, and also to allow anyone looking at that to sort of inspire or to ignite their imagination, and they can almost imagine their own bed. So there was nothing of me personally there, like bedside tables or anything to take away. The bed just became an object, really. And that's really it. So my bedroom's quite small, so I didn't have space to move my bed out. So I put just a backdrop support stand up there with an old tripod head and a clamp, and I just put the camera on there. But I would take that off every day because I also took my quilt downstairs. I've got a wee studio in my old lounge, and I would bunch up the quilt and photograph that, but that didn't become part of the project. So every day I would have to put that camera back up and make sure it was straight. So that was probably just a little logistical, not problem, but thing that I had to do each day. And that was it. I mean, it was quite a simple thing in the end. As I say, this project went on for months, and only in the last 3 weeks really did I start taking pictures of the bed in that way. But there was just lots leading up to that. So there's just, when I was reading, I printed off my evaluation this morning, and I had a quick read through. I thought, well, is there anything I've missed? And the project was there was so much involved that I was thinking about, about my own presence, our own presence, like what we leave behind, all that sort of thing. But there's so much to go into, it would take an hour to talk about. But that's really the gist of it.
So hey, I'm Katarina, live in Edinburgh still, planning to stay there for some time. At the moment, I'm involved in an artist-run studio cooperative called Mutual, so that's lucky, I have a studio there. And so also maybe a good thing to know about my work is that I often also work with performance and video. So in some ways, I see all those three mediums quite similar, or I often work with all of the three of them at the same time. And then only in the end, I'll kind of decide which one of those three will be the best one to kind of showcase. Yeah, so, okay, this project. So this was actually a funny one. I feel like at some point on my 4th year, I kind of realized that all the work I've ever made has been kind of about the same project or kind of talking about similar themes. And so therefore, the final project became about kind of concluding that somehow, because I felt like I always worked with these themes, but maybe not really realizing that I was doing that, and therefore I wasn't really able to bring it to kind of any kind of ending. So this was a way of at least getting to some kind of level of satisfaction that I feel like, okay, there's just some stage here and I can move on to something else. So then a little bit about the themes that I was kind of interested in looking at. So the human body has always been something I come back to, and that's often kind of the starting point for my projects. So with this one, I was kind of thinking about the importance of the body and how we exist through the body, and we kind of define our existence completely in relationship to the body and kind of through the body. And then that kind of led me to think about death and life and existing, and almost this kind of balance between living and then becoming aware of the possibility, or not possibility, but the inevitability of the limitations of our body. So then I just somehow remembered from like high school psychology studies, this kind of term or this kind of concept of how you can become, if there's, for example, death in your family or like a big accident in the world, you become more aware of your body, or you become more aware of the possibility that one day you actually will die as well. So that was kind of a big inspiration, then thinking about then how we relate ourselves to the body when we know that there is certain type of limitations to it. So then there was really the idea of balance that then stuck with me, and I started thinking about that in the photographs that I created. So in all of them, there is the human figure, and it's kind of pulled in different ways to different directions. So it's kind of jumping or lifted on the plinth or then kind of pulling back down, or sort of balancing. So really the balance, really what the body can do but what it can't, was kind of the thread through the images. And so then at the same time, the presentation was very important. And the idea of balance was something I wanted to also kind of continue in the presentation. So that's why I had those plinths or those shelves. So it's almost like this kind of evaluating the photograph, but then it's an illusion because then there is the wooden thing screwed on the wall. And then same with the glass. The glass is kind of lifting it and almost it's looking like the photograph's floating, but then in the same time it's pulled back down with the weight of the glass and then the plinth on the floor. So I guess that kind of idea of the possibilities the body can do, but then the limitations. So yeah, I feel like that the work was just about asking loads of questions. So asking about where do we exist? Do we exist in the body or do we exist in our minds? And if the body dies, where do all the thoughts go? Do they just disappear or are they part of the existence? So I guess asking a lot, but necessarily not answering, not giving any answers, just kind of discovering and exploring and researching and then, yeah, showing what can be shown. But I guess then there's loads of things that cannot be shown. Yeah, that's me.
Right. So my name is Lynn. I'm originally from Sweden. Graduated from Napier in 2017. So this was the degree show, a degree project that I decided that I was going to work with. The idea kind of came around already in early third year of our degree because I've always had this like kind of duality of living here and not being home in Sweden. I always miss my family. And I started to get to the point where I kind of realized that my grandmother was not going to be here for quite much more longer. Yeah, no, but the initial idea just came from the fact that I wanted to get to know my grandmother better, and I thought going into the last year I would actually have the ability to travel back home to Sweden and meet her and talk to her more. So from the start, I wasn't really sure what the project was going to be about. It was just like, I want to get to know my grandmother, I want to learn a little bit more about her life. So I started with going through all of her archives, which is quite large. It goes back to the mid-19th century and all the way up to now. So we would go through that, researching all together. I would interview her and I would stay over at her place. We went to see the house where her dad was born, which is still the same quality as it was then. And then from there, I just kind of went for different branches into themes that had to do with memory and loss, because like loss is inevitable. Everyone's gonna experience losing someone or have already experienced losing someone, and I can't imagine experiencing losing the person that you've lived together with for 63 years. So it kind of just went into being a project about my grandparents and kind of the absence and presence that my grandfather still has in her life, even though he's not present at the moment in his physical form.
And it exists as a book as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Was the book format in the front of your mind?
No, the book came quite late into thinking about the project. Because while creating the work and everything, I think I kind of tried not to create it around my grandparents at the same time from the start, simply because it's a theme that's quite sensitive to me as well. And trying to put everything together when editing all of the images that I'd taken, the only format that I could seem to do it properly in was the book format. For me, that was kind of the way I wanted to tell their story and my grandmother's story after my grandfather's passing. It felt more personal somehow to be able to have something physical in your hand and look at it than just having the pictures on the wall.
Whose work would you say is an inspiration to you?
Well, I looked a lot at Colin Gray's work, who's here today as well. Rosie Martin's work as well, her project Too Close to Home, which is about her dad's passing and her mom's passing as well.
So I have this piece and I also have this one that's on the corner, so you guys can go and look at that later, the people that can't see it. So yeah, this project is about, my subject matter is a lot about sustainability and how like to demand social change and like try to make people become aware of like their acts in life and like what they do in their everyday life. So yeah, how they treat the world that we live in and how we are gonna leave the world for the future people that's going to be in the world. Yeah, so in my degree show, I had like a lot of sculptures as well. That was something like I developed in fourth year. So I got this kind of weird thing, and I didn't really know what to use it for. It's actually funny. And then I had it on the floor while I was doing like a pre-thing before the degree show, and I put them down on the floor, and I was like, oh, maybe I should actually pin them on this piece of, it's kind of carpet underlay. So it's the thing that you have underneath your carpets. Yeah, so I put it up, and then I feel like it kind of worked because it made kind of a different way of framing the work. And also like the colors kind of mixed together. Yeah, I can speak a little bit about some of the photographs as well. I know a lot of people always ask me about this one because they're like, what is going on? And it was at a festival in Copenhagen called Trailer Park Festival, and there was there was this installation where you could listen to some music, and then at the same time you got like the vibrations in your body. So it's kind of like a comment on all the new technologies that we're like gonna experience. Yeah, and this one, I don't know if anybody has been in Glasgow airport. Like when you arrive, then there's this little weird area that they kind of like, yeah, made this little forest. And I found it really weird, like what, it's like Glasgow or like Scotland is full of nature, like go out, you don't like, this is not nature. And then the thing that there's this little, the plugs in just makes it kind of like so weird, like we're putting electricity in the forest or like ruining the nature like that, or kind of like putting it in a different way, like go out to the highlands and experience it, like instead of like coming to the airport and see like, oh, this is what it's gonna be like. Yeah. This one is one that people ask me a lot about as well. It's like a fungus thing, but I think I photographed it in some like a special way, so it looks really weird, and like I made it a little bit bigger. And yeah, the water drops on there. Yeah, some people ask me about this, but this is actually a photograph from a newspaper at Roskilde Festival, and somebody spilled like some drink on it. So it's kind of like, it's actually somebody else's, but then with like some kind of, what's it called, strawberry daiquiri or whatever, something like that on it. Yeah, and then this one is, it's actually a wind turbine farm, wind turbine farm in Schiphol in Holland. And I really wanted this, when I fly back and forth from here to Copenhagen, there's like a little wind turbine farm, but it's not as big as this. And I always like looked out for places where there was like this big farm, so I could kind of like see like what we're actually helping us making renewable energy. And then I was like flying to Amsterdam, and I saw this, and I was like, oh yes, finally, like there is something that I can show, like how it can also be a beautiful thing, because there's a lot of people that don't think that the wind turbines are very beautiful, but in a way that's like a renewable energy that's going to be really good for us in the future.
I think for me it was a very like personal project because it was looking back at home, but it was a place that over time kind of wore away for me. It was a place that I kind of didn't consider home. And Glasgow kind of felt a bit more like home for me. And that kind of comes from with the city's development. Every time I go back to Dubai, something new's kind of been built, or a set of skyscrapers have kind of popped out of nowhere. So I kind of went back, and it's quite strange going back on the tourist visa because it means I can only go for a month at a time. So it makes this project it's quite difficult making this project because I only had a set amount of times that I could kind of go back whilst juggling with uni and deadlines and things. So when going back, it was very stressful because I kind of went back for 2 weeks, and I kind of had a vision of what I wanted the project to look like. And I think when leaving Dubai and then going back a second time is when I felt more comfortable. And it was, I think, kind of letting myself go and kind of letting the city kind of form itself around me instead of me visiting places and kind of trying to make photographs that I kind of envisioned before going. And I kind of work with the metaphor of, a lot of people describe Dubai as kind of the city that was kind of rose up from the desert, and that it's kind of come out of nowhere in the past like 20 years, and it's constantly developing, and the rate at which it's growing is it's quite scary. So when going back, I kind of tried to use the landscape within the photographs to kind of incorporate how, like, the desert, like there's a saying with the desert that if you go into the desert once and then you go a second time, that will be completely different, even if you visit the exact same spot, just due to the wind moving the sediment around. And I kind of really like that idea, and that kind of really kind of ingrained itself within the project, this idea that no matter how many times we visit a place, it will always kind of be different to us. So I think with the photographs, I kind of tried to bring that in, not only with like the color palette, because it's got quite a dusty color palette, but with things like clothing that have a similar texture to that of sand dunes and kind of rippling in the wind and shifting and moving. And kind of that photo on the end there, quite an obvious one, kind of the house situated between the two sand dunes kind of looks as if it's rising up. And also something else I kind of found myself doing when visiting was all my photographs ended up being portrait, which is quite strange for a landscape project, I think. I think that had a lot to do with kind of the objects within the photographs kind of rising upwards. And it kind of made me turn my camera around the other way. And it's something I did subconsciously, which I thought was quite interesting. And I know the photographs aren't in here, but they were in my degree show. I looked at the Kushti wrestlers. So that was like another aspect of the project that kind of weaved its way in, where it was a wrestling community. And it's a very big sport in Pakistan and India, sand wrestling. But it was a dying sport there. However, it's kind of thriving in a different country. So it's quite interesting looking at how like people's influences from other countries are thriving in this foreign place, which I've tried to bring in as well, kind of people's influence, the landscape's influence on a place. It was quite a big body of work, but I feel like the photographs that have been selected and put on the wall here kind of sum it up quite well. The kind of dusty color palette, it was all done in like natural lighting with very minimal editing. I quite like that very like natural and kind of real everyday look. And I think a thing for the project that I really wanted to kind of ensure was that when photographers or artists kind of make work about Dubai, they either tend to be two ends of the spectrum. So one where it looks at like extreme wealth and almost kind of greed, and then you have the opposite side where it looks at kind of the labor workforce there and the ethical issues, which I agree with both sides. I think they definitely play an important part, but something I kind of found difficult was finding artists or photographers that have made work in Dubai that kind of fit somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. So kind of when going back, I tried to have it so that it was very ordinary and like everyday life. I think a big influence was Stephen Shaw's project, which he did in Abu Dhabi. I know that's not Dubai, but it's a 40-minute drive from Dubai and it's situated within the United Arab Emirates. So he was a big influence for this kind of project as well, and it was nice finding someone that I could kind of relate to and kind of had work that was very everyday and kind of very natural. And for me to try stay away from the big metallic kind of structures and skyscrapers, because that's something that I can be drawn into quite easily. It's quite an obvious thing to do. So, I mean, I have kind of suggestions and hints of it within the photos, because I feel like it's quite important to kind of show that side of Dubai as well. But they were all taken in an area of Dubai called Satwa, which unfortunately is looking to kind of almost be wiped out in a way. People describe Dubai to suffer from something called urban amnesia, which is when a city kind of not destroys things, but kind of moves things to one side, or they knock down buildings and put something new there. So the city is constantly like developing in a way that it kind of doesn't have a strong history or past. Whereas the area these photos were taken in, Satwa, kind of one of the oldest parts of Dubai and is kind of known as the Old Town Dubai. And it kind of, in terms of the city, is one of the last few places that kind of has very traditional buildings to the Middle East.